Hello, 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 and welcome to Getting Real with Paula. My name is Paula Alphonse, and tonight I am speaking with Sandra Hunter about the insidious impact of our current virtual reality. Sandra is a powerful transformational life coach who works with professional women of color to release the somatic stress that is induced by workplace microaggressions as well as racism. In this episode, we are exploring the various messaging that we are unknowingly absorbing via our increased screen time consumption. Let's be honest, pandemic has created this little situation, as well as looking at ways to mitigate these negative impacts. So, without further ado, let's get on with this topic, which is likely to open your eyes to some of the indoctrination that we are routinely subjected to. So, good evening, Sandra, and welcome.
Good evening, Paula. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Hello, hello, hello. It is a pleasure to have you. And I am so looking forward to delving into those details. But before we actually get too deep in our exchange, I would like you, if you don't mind, to introduce yourself using 5 words
Okay.
and let us know as well why you chose those words.
Passionate about transformation for women.
Mhm.
And the reason I chose those words is because professional women of color have been subjected to so much stress from whether it's microaggressions or marginalization or isolation, and they feel weighed down by that. And they are kind of crammed into a negative mindset. And there is a way to escape that. There is a way to completely transform your mindset so that you are absolutely in control. You've got a force field around you of your story, and you can actually walk forward in your power boots and take over the world. That's what I want to do.
Thank you. Thank you. That sounds like such a strong mission. I told you she was powerful. And I like also the imagery with our powerful boots. And this is the sense where, yes, it reminds me of that 70 video back then. It was called These Boots Are Made for Walking.
Oh.
But that's the thing. There are certain situations where you might just want to do that, walk away and figure out what works for you. But let's not digress because, we can do this easily. I know we've talked before and we know each other, unfortunately. So let me keep myself from being a distraction as well. So could you share with us some of the highlight of your life journey as well as career, and what led you to turn to entrepreneurship?
So I could talk about all the racism. I could talk about being chased by people who threw stones at me. And I became a very fast runner, by the way. I won a lot of district sports events. But what I'd like to talk about is this pivotal moment when I had the opportunity to work in Kenya for 2 years. And at that time, there was this wave, maybe it was the first wave or second wave of feminism. I can't remember which wave it was. But it was all about improving the self. And there was a reason for that, right? Because women had been kept down, as they are still being kept down. Mm-hmm. And so women were saying, we need to fight for ourselves. We need to push ourselves ahead. We need to be like the men, which was such an unfortunate conclusion. Mm-hmm. But it was all about self-promotion. And that came directly from a white, male patriarchal set of values, which was inculcated in England, which is where I grew up. When I went to Kenya, I saw that it wasn't about that women were very interested in gaining perspective, gaining autonomy, gaining power by working for themselves, whether it was in a women's co-op or whether it was through teaching, whatever it was, or small business or micro business as it was called. So they were very interested in that, but not for themselves alone. They wanted the individual freedom, but they were planning for the generation ahead. And it was what was going to be good for the community. And to me, that is such a creative way of looking at transformation. Instead of bringing on board this ancient, decrepit, white male patriarchal, it's the individual effect that counts. You look at your community and say, how do we lift the community together? That was a really pivotal point for me. And I wasn't sure what it was going to do, but I held on to that. The next pivotal point was coming back to England and realizing I'm not English and I'm not British and I don't know what I am, but I don't belong in this environment alone. So my home has always become with the people that I know and love, and that I get to have different homes in different areas, and that's fine by me. I mean, my background is Anglo-Indian, Burmese, Sri Lankan, Portuguese, Dutch, and Scots. So I consider all of those to be part of my heritage, and I'm, really jazzed that I have so much in my heritage, but it doesn't allow me to think of home as being a geographical place. So that was point 2. Then I was working with a lot of young people as I started teaching at college, and I saw that it was the kids of, BIPOC kids who didn't understand that there were facilities available to them under their, purely because they were a student. They didn't know about the medical center. They didn't know they could go and apply for loans. They didn't know about bursaries. They didn't even know that they could actually change classes if they were having difficulties. And when I started talking to them about this, because you could see what was happening, the white kids seemed to know. They had all of that stuff down. The BIPOC kids didn't. And this was what was so interesting. When you talk to them, they either genuinely didn't know, they were surprised, there's a medical center, I can go there and I can get free help. Or they would say, yes, I can see that, but that's really not for me, is it? And that's when I realized the 2 most important things for me out of Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers was opportunity and mentorship. And those are the things that drove me to this point. Also was moving from Los Angeles up to Portland in Oregon, major transition for me, realizing I had to divorce my husband of 22 years, second major realization. Thirdly, getting my own house, so moving twice, in other words. And fourthly, realizing that my passion was to make it possible for professional women of color like me, who had been held down, who'd been denied, who'd had, promotions withheld from them, who had been overlooked for promotion, had programs denied purely because it didn't fit in with what the white Senate wanted. I realized, I'm here and I've fought tooth and nail to be in this situation, to be a professor, as many other people of my generation and the next generation coming up have fought to be in professional positions. I'm looking forward and saying nothing has changed for the next generation. They are going to be educated and certified and degreed, and they're going to be so full of hope for all these things they're going to do in tech and in science and in agriculture and in business. And they're going to get the job. They will get the job. And then after that, it will be the same microaggressions and the same marginalization. So that is the powering force that made me feel now is the time. I have to do this now.
Thank you. It's I can feel the passion in your discourse, and unfortunately I can hear the relevance of your points, because I'm in a different country than yours. We're experiencing the same realities, where you have people that have, as you say, multiple degrees, that have the skill set, but have struggling to actually be recognized for their skill set, but also move through the organization to give back what it is that they want to contribute to the rest of the organizations
Yeah.
or the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So yes, 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 I am so connected with that. In just because I know we could speak on that for really long.
Yeah.
But let's go back to that topic we said we wanted to cover, and it touches in some ways what you started. But
Certainly.
we'll come back to that.
Mhm.
In terms of inclusion and showing the different voices of diversity on TV, what have been some of your observation in terms of the progress in giving more space to the realities outside
Mhm.
of the mainstream worldview?
There have been changes. And we've seen this with, Shonda Rhimes, Issa Rae. There are so many people, especially, I'm so jazzed to see women of color. Michaela Cole from England coming up and presenting these extraordinary, engaging, and provocative uh, content in television and in film that is opening us up to more cultures. This is just, yes, this is cause for celebration. At the same time, we still have most of the media that is driven by the white perspective. And this is, rather than just jumping to one conclusion, let's understand how television works.
Mhm.
Television works on ratings. That's it. That's the bottom line. It's not about what's culturally resonant or what ought we to put on. It's just what's getting the most points.
Mhm.
So what will happen is if there's a patterning that occurs, so that if one thing works, we get this funny looking Indian guy and he has a funny accent and suddenly the ratings go up. Let's include funny looking guys with funny Indian accents. And we saw that on The Simpsons.
Mhm.
Right? Right? So, and voiced by a white male, Hank Azaria, who had that position on the show for a long time. I think he finally stepped down from that in 2020, I believe. And under a storm of protest, just this character has been created purely for entertainment value.
Mhm.
And entertainment is not bad in and of itself, but when it starts to stereotype people, let's remember that America is not made up of coastal cities. It's not all New York or all Los Angeles or all Portland.
Mhm.
It's made up of large swathes of people who have never encountered those cultures before. Let's just look back at the Sex in the City episode, right? Where Carrie has her Indian friend who is terrified of her parents and because she's living alone and smoking in secret and having her marriage arranged. These are all such old, creaky stereotypes for Indian women. Furthermore, in that show, Carrie is supposed to go with her friend, her Indian friend, to a sari shop. They didn't go to a sari shop. A sari shop, as somebody who's been to India and sat in a sari shop, is nothing like that. You are brought in, you're sat down, you're given a cup of tea, and there are just bolts and bolts and bolts of silks lining the shelves. Without a word to you, the attendants will start throwing down bolt after bolt of these colors of silk until you point to a color that you like. You're still not speaking at this point. They will kick all the other silks aside and then throw bolt after bolt of patterns in that color. You're treated like royalty in the sari shop, and then they get you up onto the little dais and they twist the sari around you and you look gorgeous, and you buy your sari and you leave. What Carrie and her friend went to was a lehenga shop, which was like a high fashion boutique. It was the big swirly skirts which you've seen in Bollywood movies and the little blouses that are called cholis. That was completely different. Now that's a small detail for most people, but for the thousands of Indian Americans who are watching that show, they're thinking, you got so much wrong. You had an opportunity to show us as we were, but then you got it wrong completely. And going back to those thousands and thousands of Americans who are not in the coastal cities, who don't have the opportunity to meet a lot of other cultures, this is their only contact with perhaps an Indian person, with perhaps a Muslim, with perhaps, an Indonesian. And so because that's what they're seeing, they might not say, all of this is true. There will be an effect. because that's going to be perpetuated, and that's going to be their idea of what an Indian person is.
Mhm.
And that's where unconscious bias comes in.
And I like what you're pointing out, because I know for me, my children hate watching TV with me because I tend to be the one who points out those things. That's not the way it works. And that's the part where, as you do, they have people, research teams within most studios that are meant to know different. But at the same time, if you're not hiring the right people to do or represent the right reality, then you only get that person's perception or stereotyped ideas of what
Mm-hmm.
this should be. So, totally with you on this one. So, let's keep moving. And in terms of, and when I say let's keep moving, it's just there would be so many different examples we could provide. But what would be for you some of the drawbacks of displaying such wider realities without considering the um, true realities of those in those cultures?
Yeah,
Give me a sense of that larger, the drawbacks. How do we know that, hey, this is off?
well, you don't, frankly, until you do your own research, because the algorithms that we have, and as we all know, I hope everybody's watched The Social Dilemma. If not, this is something you should watch. You have your own algorithm that's tailored to you. So wherever you go online, you will be followed by things that you're interested in. And it's not just the things that you click on, but it's how much time you spend looking at something. That all goes into the algorithm specifically tailored for you, that then starts feeding more of those things that you stop at. So it's not just ads, it will be matters of interest, such as politics, such as environment. So, there's all these things that get fed to you. So if you go to one site, for example, on the environment, and you're passionately against the use of plastic, you will start to see more and more of those stories in your feed. Okay, so let's look at the parallel here. If you are seeing more and more stories about Muslims that reflect the little bit that you know about Muslims, or that you think you will not grow beyond that. And then you'll start talking to people in those chat rooms, if you get into those chat rooms, and that will start influencing you too. And you won't even understand that there's a different mindset out there. You will think everybody thinks like you. So that's why we get events like January the 6th happening, this mutual shock when people who were attacking the Capitol realized that not everybody wanted to attack the Capitol, and people who were watching in shock were thinking, how did this happen? That's social media. That's the inculcation of those ideas that everybody gets whipped up to think that, yes, this is the right thing to think about. And you fall into this logical fallacy. There's a logical fallacy that we teach in critical thinking called the either or.
Yeah.
So you're either supporting this person or you're against that person. And that's used very effectively in politics. And it can, it can expand to so many other things, that you either think this about BIPOCs, or you think that, you either like BIPOC people or you hate BIPOC people, when it's just, there is so much else to consider. You can't just make a single decision based on one website or one article. The other thing is that because we are fed this information through media and TV and movies, and and these chat rooms, our ideas are being formed, and we have beliefs about other groups. And that means, that keeps perpetuating as well. Instead of being able to go outside of that and find non-biased sources, we are, we're self-perpetuating the same ideas, because there's a reason for that. It's because it's easier. We are basically lazy. We want to be fed stuff, right?
And what it creates is that sense of larger disconnect with the realities, with real life, but also with that sense of, as you say, with that algorithm, I have that illusion that oh, it's happening a lot more often than I think, but technically I'm getting fed that same information, which is
Exactly.
the one I notice, and I'm like, oh, I stayed too long there, and they think that's all you want to know. We'll give you more of that.
Exactly. Exactly. And so it tends to box you in. Your world actually becomes smaller and it's more controlled. I mean, originally social media was designed to connect people,
Hmm.
and we're finding it's the opposite.
Yeah.
And that we've had so much time during COVID to actually reinforce our stereotypical beliefs. And that's everyone. That's not just, one group of people. That's for everyone.
And
So
that's
that
because we're not seeing people anymore. It's just we're, and again, this is where we go back to that consumption and
mm,
continuous consumption. So the more I look at things, the more I get that information. And because we've been doing screen time, I don't think and I'm not a TV person.
yeah,
And so most of my screen time is through the internet or the Zoom and all of these things. But the reality still is
yes,
you get fed a certain type of information. And until you actually first acknowledge that and do other type of research, then you take it for granted. This must be true.
right. And
And
I think
yeah.
that's the issue about. I mean, you were talking about tools to actually help you get out of this. And
Mhm.
here's one: is just look at your immediate circles. Just look at the people in your circles. Do they all have the same opinion as you? Do they all like the same music? Do they all hang out in the same place? I mean, if there's a lot of similarity, I mean, there's going to be some similarities. We're drawn to similar people.
Mhm.
But if it's all like that, if there's nobody in your group that disagrees with you or disagrees with certain opinions that you have, you
Yeah.
might want to check that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. And I'm hearing that and I'm seeing it as you're describing it, because I look at certain situations and for the longest time, let's talk about, it's one of those Shonda Rhimes show, Bridgerton.
Oh, yes.
And even though there were also stereotypes into this, but it's also the era we were depicting.
Mhm.
But when you saw all the groups mixed in, there's a beauty to it, but then at the same time your mind is also registering, but that never was like this.
Exactly, exactly. Because Bridgerton was written by a white person about a
Intentional.
white culture and is
Mhm.
actually, written on screen by a white person, even though it's owned by Shondaland.
Mhm.
So, and some of the most obvious things, like the relationship between the Indian, I think we're in season 2 now, and you can see that I've watched it. The Indian girl, Kate, and the Lord, the White Lord. No one discusses the racial issues that might come up because of that marriage. No one. That's never. It's just they have their issues, but then they frolic about in their Regency attire, looking fabulous together. She's an Indian woman, with Indian values and Indian customs and an Indian family, and yet all of that is kind of flattened. All of it, and I love the idea of
Mhm.
Bridgerton, but I feel that it is fluff.
It's as though, at least for me, there were certain things where, as you say, it missed the mark because you had a lot of representation, but then the issues that usually come with representation were never mentioned. So it comes with that sense that there's no problem. It's like when you see people saying, "Oh, we don't see colors. When I see you, I don't see colors," and you're like, okay, if you can't tell apart an apple and an orange, I think you can't see color. So don't pretend. And that's the
Yeah.
part where sometimes, even when you're trying, and it's progress, definitely
Mhm.
it's progress
Yeah.
forward, but
Mhm.
it's those elements as we're going into more details and you're tying the knots, because every
Mhm.
day, let's just say, if you bring in a friend to your house,
Mhm.
they will notice the hair, the clothes, the origin, the way they talk. And in this fallacy of
Mhm.
a world,
Mhm.
everything was similar.
Mhm.
And you're
Mhm.
thinking,
So
gee,
to me, it completely elided the idea of having so many cultures together. I mean, the concept was good, but then it was completely undercut.
Yeah.
So what was the point of having all those people together?
Yeah.
If we weren't, because the reality is, if you have people together in a mixed group. I was lucky enough in my undergraduate to go to college with a wide variety of people who were Jamaican and Swedish, and we had somebody from Nigeria. And those were topics that we talked about all the time. Oh, back home, we don't do it this way. We do it this way. And, we exchanged words in Igbo and in Swahili and various things like that. And it was just, you got to know people very differently, rather than just automatically accepting everybody as though that didn't exist. Those cultural and color differences didn't exist. And that, to me, destroys the show, ultimately.
I'm not going to cut it to pieces, because it's those places where it's progress, but then it's where we need to go a little deeper when we're exploring certain realities.
But we need to go a lot deeper, though. We need to go a lot deeper.
Nowadays, I think there's, especially now that anyone can travel the globe. Anyone can go anywhere, technically.
Right.
Why don't we stop those stereotypes?
Yes.
Why don't we actually do the full research? You can be 1 week in Dubai and the next week you're in Zimbabwe. Technically, as easy for anyone. Right. So therefore, sometimes this is the part where it's acknowledging that we sometimes are lazy into finding out what else could it be, and we just, as you say, we're repeating the same recipe.
Right.
So that's one.
I do feel, and I'm not saying that Bridgerton should be destroyed. I mean,
no.
For me, it was a disappointment. It was just, this is where it stopped. It stopped at such a shallow layer. But I think, and not necessarily in Bridgerton, because it's specifically about this Regency time, and it's very much kind of a pseudo Jane Austen type of story. But I believe if those conversations were brought up, there would be so much attention, there would be so much interest, and it would give people, this larger swath of America that might not normally have the opportunity to meet other cultures, to actually genuinely meet those cultures. Even if not in their real life, that's something representative that attempts to approach those problems would be a great way to start the conversation.
Totally agree. And I think there's still that sense of perceiving TV as entertainment versus the potential. Because nowadays, I think we need to move towards edutainment, where it's not just, something, some of those reality shows that we're not going to go into details on that. Sometimes it's just like, those are total fallacy. Yeah. If you didn't have money, none of this could be possible. So it's just, there's certain type of conversation where you're like, okay, why are we watching this? Why are we there on that? So I'm going to ask you, why is it important for us to make the difference between real life and the stories that are portrayed either in TV and social media?
Okay, so this goes to your perception of yourself. And this goes to knowing your own story. So if you don't know your story, and your story starts with, your ancestors, and it talks about your life story as well. You need to know how those two are connected, and you need to know how you connect to the stories that are coming up contemporarily by poets and activists and bloggers and, politicians, right? All of that is your story. But if you get filled up with the entertainment, because this is what it is, if you get filled up with entertainment, you believe that, and you take that in, it's destroying your story. It's taking down who you are, and your identity will be disparate. And so you need to be very firm in your idea of who you are, so that you can keep that at a distance and you can recognize it for what it is. Some of my students used to look at advertising as advice. So it was just, and that, it's a lot more broader than you'd think. It was just that, well, I ought to do this. And they'd see the happy group of kids, drinking some kind of beer on a beach. And of course, what they're selling is the lifestyle, right? So my students will be, oh, if I get that, then I'm going to be those people, or almost as good as those people.
Yeah.
And it's the insidiousness of advertising and social media too, but specifically advertising, that makes people think that this is possible because it's so clever, right? Having a really strong center in your identity, where you're from, where you are, and where you're going, and what you are giving forward to the next generation, that's your force shield. That's the thing that will protect you against all of that. And also, again, just going back to this point of knowing that your personal social circles are varied. They're not homogenous. They're not all you, because otherwise that's also going to be a trap for you.
Because you have tunnel vision. You're seeing things from one angle and you can't see what is available out there.
Right.
The potential that you could step into. It might be okay if you feel as though you fit, but it's even worse for those people who are in environments where it's like, is it me? But this doesn't fit my reality. This doesn't fit. So I start thinking there's something wrong with me when it's actually.
Exactly. And that's the effect of watching so much that you take it on as almost as another entity into your life. I remember people talking about their second life avatars. And enjoying that so much and loving that so much, because obviously you can do anything, in your avatar life, but taking on that life as being more important than the one that you're actually living. That's the danger.
The challenge. Yeah. And this is used because again, this is so insidious. You think it's just a game. You think it's just reality TV. You think it's just whatever entertainment. I go to bed and I don't think about it. But the reality is you're taking on those messages and you're using them, or you're applying them to what should be your real life, when technically it might not match at all. It's not because I have this car that I will be happy. It's not because I live in this city that I will experience success. And those are, to some, are obvious, but as you're growing up, as you're a young adult and you don't know, depending what you've been exposed to, it's this sense where, okay, what's wrong with me not getting? And that's to me the bigger challenge.
There's also that sense of shoring up a sense of security. And let's face it, these are very wobbly times that we're living in. And the sense of anxiety and tension has rocketed. I'm seeing it in my work. I'm sure you're seeing it in yours. And so a sense of security, wherever you can find it, is what people want the most. They want community. If they can't get community because of COVID and they're being isolated, then they'll get that from their algorithm. And there's a sense of, feeling secure in that. And because they don't have something else to give them that sense of security. But the danger is that your view of the world becomes very tunnel visioned, as you said, very, very tiny, and you won't really understand how you relate to the rest of the world. And you do become cut off in a lot of ways, so that if you come across somebody who has a different perspective, it's shocking to you.
Because you're so ingrained in that perception, that's the way to go, that somebody coming in is just like, what's wrong with you? What could be an opportunity to stretch my perspective becomes a sense where I need to defend myself or my point of view, and you're the wrong person, and whatever else follows. It's those maybe hasty judgments that create maybe, okay, it was just a different opinion about XYZ. Should it create or rip family apart or things like that? And sometimes we're seeing such different realities, we can no longer, or we have lost that ability to weave realities together.
Right. That's such an important point, that idea of that anxiety and that tension causing so much, this feeling of being fraught, so that you identify with opinion. You identify with, instead of having your own identity, you add that opinion onto yourself as that's part of me, so that, as you say, when somebody comes in and has another point of view, you feel threatened. You feel threatened individually. It's not the opinion that's, you know, should be under review. It's you personally feel threatened. So there's a loss of the ability to critically evaluate your environment, and we need that now more than ever.
Oh, big time. Would you mind giving us some more concrete example of scenarios that to you appear highly improbable or might reflect some level of implicit bias? And it could be from your journey traveling, because I know for myself, every single time I travel, I see things that I've taken for granted in my normal, usual environment. And then when I get to a different country or a different city, it's being done differently. And all of a sudden you're like, huh, notice I have a bias.
Yes. Two things here. I've noticed for myself, if I go outside of my milieu and I go to another country where it's predominantly one color or another, usually white, then I'm seen as exotic or submissive or a temptress or pushy, or I'm a controlling mother, or I'm inarticulate. And that's before I've even opened my mouth. I can get all of that.
Yeah.
And I've also noticed that I am subject to my own set of, you know, reactions, right? I'm also prey to those. And I noticed when I was driving home the other day that there was a group of kids playing on the side of the road, and they were black. And I thought, oh, I wonder if this is a black neighborhood. Bong, right? And I thought, okay, what am I doing here? If there'd been a group of kids and they were Indian, what would I have thought? And the answer came, I would have wondered, is this an Indian neighborhood? And then I thought, okay, what if there were a group of white kids on the sidewalk? And I thought I would have had no reaction.
Yeah.
So it's that insidious that it's great, because now I check myself when, you know, wherever I am, I'm checking to see, okay, what am I responding to? Is this a valid response? Am I responding from bias? Because all the time, the bias that comes at me through social media and through, you know, movies, largely, even though I try to choose the movies that are not this way, is largely still white oriented. And it's depicted in such a way, and sometimes in such a way that you don't even realize it's happening. Here's a great checklist for you when you're watching shows: is how many BIPOC people are in the show? Are they the main character? What is the other relationship of other people to that BIPOC? Are they treated with respect? What amount of dialogue do they have? And how frequently does that happen in scenes? And are they a recurring character?
And I will add to it. Do the people you see, the represented people that you see, are they feeling your perspective of a stereotype? And you might not know it's a stereotype, but let's just say you see an Indian person and to you, they must work in a restaurant. If you see somebody taking drugs in a dark alley, it has to be, could it be? Oh my God, it's a Black person. And those are things we're not always noticing, but we, as you say, we have to check ourselves. And I know for me, it's simple little things. As a female, you walk in the street during the day, you're always paying attention when you see a bunch of men gathered somewhere. And in my brain, it was always mentioned, if there's too many of them, pay attention. And this is where it's the group think mentality in that environment that create challenges. Late at night, you're a female, you're walking to your car. I'm still the type of person need to check where my keys are. And not check for my keys in the sense that I want to open my car fast, because nowadays we don't even use keys like that. It's mostly, if anything happens, what do I need to do? And this is where you realize there are some implicit bias. And every single one of us has that.
Right.
But
There's this, I'm sorry, but there's this inculcation of fear.
yeah,
You always check to see,
yeah,
I check when I go outside. I check when I go into shops, what's the ratio of non-bike park to bike park? Am I likely to be seen as,
mhm,
somebody suspicious, or am I going to be followed because I'm a person of color? So you've
mhm,
always got that extra layer
yeah.
that you're being checked, and you're checking yourself to
Mhm,
make sure that you're safe.
mhm. And when you recognize those in social media or in movies, it's also paying attention what's the narrative around these
Yes.
characters.
Yeah.
There are some, let's just say, if you see a single mother and with multiple kids, there's this tendency of assuming they have to have a certain or
Yes.
ethnic origin.
Yes.
And you're like, really? Because not all of them look like that.
Yeah.
And it's this part I know for, at least in Canada, immigration is actually what is building the country, because most people in
Mm.
Canada have 1.2 kids, most couples. But then in our communities, we usually have 3+
Hmm.
kids. So therefore, there's certain things that could be a reality, but
Hmm.
the way it's done repetitively
Hmm.
can become, that is becoming a bit of a stereotypes.
Here's the issue with that. It's a very human thing. We pattern in our
Mhm,
response to things. So stereotyping is part of what we do, and it's a survival technique,
mhm,
right? The challenge is to go beyond the stereotype impulse, to say,
yes.
okay, so I've seen a black man on the street and he's coming towards me. I may not need to cross the road, right? Because that tends to be, that tends to be a response. I have a friend, poet Doug Kearney, working at Cal State. Not Cal State, I'm sorry, Caltech, not Cal Arts, get the right one. He's a poet working at Cal Arts. So he's a tenured professor, very famous performance poet, and does a lot of stuff with music. When he comes out of his office in the evening, and there is a young girl, a young white girl coming along the corridor, he will drop his keys, he will make a big show of being clumsy so that he's not seen as a
It's
threatening black
dangerous.
male.
Yeah. See, and this is how you modify your behaviors to
Yeah.
accommodate the environment.
Yes.
And at least he knows that's about it. But some people don't know, and then they're perceived as being more of a danger than they actually are.
Right.
And that's those are again those ideas that we've ingrained. And as you said, the brain operates by patterns. I
Mm-hmm.
understand my information. So that's why
Mm-hmm.
you know that this is the road to turn left on to get home, because it's the pattern. You don't even
Yeah.
think about it. Sometimes your car turns and
Yeah.
you think it chucks. I was supposed to go somewhere else before going home. And that's the part. It's good in some areas, but in
Yeah.
others, it creates challenges for us, whether
Yeah.
we're aware of it.
Right. And I think that's the issue of being aware, to
Yeah.
to remind you, and it's tiring,
Mhm.
right? So we don't like to do the thing that's tiring.
Thank you very much. It's like exercises, but we're not going to go there. So I'm going to ask, how
Yes.
can
Hmm.
someone become more aware of these messaging that they're carrying and counteract some of those negative impacts?
Hmm. So for example, avoid binging, which we all do, and I'm a big culprit. Avoid binging on TV when you're tired, right?
Okay.
When you're down, when you're depressed,
Can
when
you
you've had a
expand?
bad day, because you're going to be much, much more susceptible to negative stereotypes than if you were more alert and feeling confident and powerful about yourself. And what you need to do is to look for the ways to train yourself to develop positive neural pathways. So the brain is hardwired for negative neural
Mhm,
pathways, and that's atavistic, because we were survivors. The
mhm,
rustling in the bushes was not likely to be somebody to pop out with party balloons. It was likely to be, the saber-toothed tiger.
mhm,
So to create positive neural pathways, you have to choose experiences that mean something enlivening and supportive and filling for you.
Mhm.
So this could be going back to memories that are wonderful for yourself, thinking about friends that you had, or wonderful moments with family, or with with aunts, with uncles, with anybody in your circle. But train yourself to start thinking of those, and what you need to do with them is to make them into stories. And you handwrite them, and the reason you handwrite them is you're telling your body, I'm creating a memory. I'm moving
Mhm.
my hand across the page. Here is the page against my hand. Here is the pen in my fingers. And so you create that, you start writing it. And once you write the story, you tell it aloud. And maybe you get to tell it to a friend, or maybe you get to tell it to the mirror. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter. But by doing that, by placing it into the written word, a physical written activity, and then speaking it from your diaphragm out, it goes into your long-term memory. And that's part of your memory treasure box. And that's what you go to when you're feeling overwhelmed.
Okay, and I hear that and I understand that. So what I'm also hearing, don't know whether I've picked it up correctly. So if I'm tired and I'm binging on something, it should not be on those things that create additional fears for me. So if I'm afraid of horror movies, do not watch horror movies when you're tired, because now you not only will not you not be able to sleep, but then you're seeing everyone around coming for you,
Right.
and and that's okay. I get it,
And then
and
also, Paula, it's don't binge on stuff that reinforces negative stereotypes,
yeah,
because you're more susceptible to that. And it's a difficult thing to do. I've been training myself recently, because I've been doing a lot of binging, which I shouldn't be doing. But I've started listening to poetry
hmm
on my phone, or I'll listen to a book, so that I don't have to physically read. I'm usually tired by, in the evening, but
hmm
I can have something else that will nourish me and inculcate better neural pathways for myself, that I can then draw on should I, start to feel
yeah.
like I'm in a bad place.
And that's about being more selective about what we take on in terms of watching, hearing, and things like that. I know with my kids when they were young, and I say when they were young, when I had a little more control over what it is that they were doing, there were certain type of movies or certain type of music. Not we're not doing that in my house.
Mm-hmm.
Because the negativity or the displaying of certain values or lack of values, according to me,
Mm-hmm.
was such that no,
Yeah.
this is not going to happen. And that's the part, as we become adult, sometimes depending on what was fed in as I was growing up, there are elements where I can't make that difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then I find myself, as you say, relieving those negative patterns and not finding my way out. So
Yeah.
it's, as you say, it's that the process of building those positive
Right.
neural pathways,
And
which
we
is,
also
Mhm.
And we also need to remember we're modeling this stuff all the time for our kids. Like, you did such a great work of saying, no, we're not having this in the house. But then if you sit there and binge late night on something awful, you know, kids are amazing. They know this stuff and they can pick it up. So you might be teaching them, you need to do this, but you're modeling something completely differently. They will follow what you do, not necessarily what you
Oh
say.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely, and I'm big on that. And I now have a grandchild, and of course, some people will tell me that, "Ah, Ma, you see trouble everywhere," but for me, it's is the message being reinforced a positive one
Mhm.
or a
Mhm.
negative one? And
Yeah.
that's the part you don't think it matters, but the number of time I hear it, and children, they're gonna
Oh, yeah.
watch something. Oh my God, relooping for hours and days, and you're thinking, I can't be in another room and I know exactly what's gonna be said in the
Yeah.
next sentence. So I'm an adult, so imagine for the kids.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
capture even more information than we do as
Oh
adults.
yes. Oh yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that.
Mm.
If I was to ask you, what would be the top 3 nuggets you would want to give to women who might be experiencing implicit bias or macroaggression in the work
Okay.
environment? So we're going back to some of the
Okay.
things you've mentioned earlier.
Okay. But there are some things that you can do immediately to make yourself feel better. And this is part of the program that I do. But you need to come back to your breath. You need to come back to your breathing. When you are facing those incidents, your blood pressure will go up, possibly your heart rate will go up. So you need to get to a place where you can breathe. Now, you don't need to do anything immediately. You can switch off your screen if you're in a meeting, or you can go to a different, go and sit on the sofa or in a chair in another room. But leave the place where you received the hurt. Okay. And then just listen to your breathing. Put a hand on your chest and listen to your breathing. And your breathing will start to calm down because you're paying attention to it. And then you start taking the breath. So you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4. And when I say for 4, it's 4 counts. Usually you can, listen to your heartbeat, and that will do it for you. And what you will do by doing that is you will calm your parasympathetic nervous system. So we have 2 nervous systems, autonomous nervous systems. The sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight, flight, or freeze mode. Some people call it the fawn mode as well. And that tells you, you need to get out right now, and it heightens everything. And then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the ease and digest and relax, rest and relax. So that's the system you're aiming at when you start slowing your breathing down, because you're telling your parasympathetic nervous system, we don't need to run, we don't need to hide, everything is calm, I've got it under control. And then once that relaxes, and it takes maybe just a few breaths to do that, then you'll be able to think more calmly. You can't think calmly if your whole body is tense. Another thing you can do is to stretch. A lot of our tension sits in our necks and in our shoulders, right? So you can do just simple neck stretches to one side and then to the other side, and hold for a count of 5 on each side, and forward and back. So that you're holding, you're tipping your head down. You can actually put your hands behind your head and help your head to tip down. Do it very carefully, and then hold for a count of 5, and then release the head gradually to normal, and then tip the head back. And you'll feel the stretch all along the throat. The same thing for the sides of the neck. If you find that it's a little bit crunchy on one side, like for me, I can really feel it back here, just take a little bit of time and circle the head forward to the other side, and then circle the head back. And just doing those circles, if you can go all the way around, be very careful because you've got a lot of, disc activity back there. So you want to circle all the way around. And when you feel a point where you could feel, I can feel it, there's a knot here, then you want to stay there and let that stretch out. So those are your basic stretches. And obviously the third nugget is knowing how to access the parasympathetic nervous system. If you know that breathing and stretching, if you learn how to calm that down, it will make it much easier for you to remain calm as you go back into your workplace. You can't change your workplace, okay? Let's understand something. You can't change your work environment, but you can change how you
react to it.
Your work environment. Yes, you can be responsive. And you can be responsive knowing that you are the center of what you're doing, and knowing that you're holding your space with your shoulders back, shoulders relaxed, hands free, knowing that you have value to add in any situation.
Thank you. Thank you. That's such it's such a positive message, but something that most women, and I'm saying most women, I'm sure there are some men also that need to hear this, but the reality is within the workplace, which is such a patriarchal environment, often more than the race, there's also the issue about sexism, racism, educationism, and all of those things that play and add to the irritant. So
Yes.
Love the stretches you've thought about, but also the importance of having that mantra to remind ourselves the value we bring to
Mm.
to this environment. If you know me, and I know we've talked about it, I am all about boundaries.
Mm.
So for me in the workplace, boundaries where this space that I
Mhm.
would create myself to remove some of those microaggression.
Mm.
So I'll ask you, in your journey, what are some of the boundaries that you've put into place that have created the most personal growth for you?
Learning to say no.
Hey,
That's the biggest one.
simple. Yeah.
The biggest one for me was I'm sure I share this with a number of your listeners. I wanted to please everybody. I
Mhm.
wanted people to like me, because I was a woman of color and maybe they wouldn't notice my color so much if I was pleasing everybody. And it
Mhm.
was such a pointless exercise, pointless, exhausting, and completely a failure.
Mhm.
So learning to say no when people said, oh, could you just do, or could I just add, is just saying, no, no. I can't, I'm sorry, I can't do that. If you have a priority that you want to bring up with our supervisor, or we could go together and talk about which priorities make the most sense for you, then yes, I can, we can have that
Mhm.
discussion. But I can't add to whatever it is I'm
Our
doing now.
workload and what? Yeah.
Yeah. And that also has spilled over into other areas of my life. Learning to say no to the party I'm too exhausted to go to speaking at an event that I know I don't have the energy for,
Mhm.
to take on one extra class that I might not bring my full self to. It's so important to me to bring everything into every event that I host or that I teach. And if I feel that I'm going to do it less than, then I
Mhm.
can't. I just can't do it.
And I love the way you say, if I feel that I'm going to do it less than,
Mm-hmm.
because my experience has been that a lot of women are people pleasers. And that's the way we're raised. We're raised to cater to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then not only are we people pleaser, but we also want to do it like that superwoman syndrome. So, which means I have to do it best than anybody else.
Right.
So the two together makes it almost impossible to say no and then not feel guilty because XYZ didn't take place.
Right, right. And I really
Constant
hate this,
struggle.
you're so strong, like women of color are just like, I don't know, we're like the Hulk, we can do everything. We can do it angrily and better than anybody else, and we're green as well. It's just, can we stop saying that about women of
Yeah,
color? Can we stop saying that about BIPOCs? We're no stronger than anybody else.
yeah.
But we're expected to be that because we've got this role that we've suddenly been
Mhm.
admitted to being managers, and we better value that. And it's just this, this idea of being, as you say, expected and expecting ourselves to
Mhm.
perform so highly. What happens, and I've been in this situation so many times, is that you say, yes, I ought to say yes. And then you go and do the thing and you are on form and you are brilliant. And what it does to you is it completely wrecks you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the reason that you say no.
Yeah, yeah, and learning to say no is what I consider a constant struggle.
Mm.
I'm in my 50s now, and trust me, every time I have to say no, I have to prepare myself. There are certain things that will be easy. Do you want to do that? No, thank you. That's fine. But especially if it means a request that would be of assistance to someone else, this is where I'm having more
Yeah.
challenge. And that's the part that's some of us women think that you learn to say it once and then it's everything miraculously is resolved. It is not an
No.
Hollywood movie. So, which means it's one of those that you have to keep mastering. And it starts with small little things. And then as you move in your journey, it will be those bigger decisions. I no longer want to be in this relationship, but it's working for me. I'm happy for you, but it is not working for me.
Right.
And those are those harder pieces as we move forward that we need to pay attention to. And I go back to this from the what we said earlier, the modeling. As we're making our way through to our journey and learning to say no, also remembering we're helping to raise the next generation to hear that there's nothing wrong with saying no, and then passing on to something else. And that's the part where unfortunately that wasn't clear. And that's, it's, we all think we finished school and everything is perfect after that. And then you realize, what? Still have to work at things? Yes, we still have.
Yes, we do.
And that's the part of being human.
I really like that. I think that idea of being, learning to say no without making excuses. Like saying, oh, I'd love to help, but I'm doing this, because I'm still struggling with that one, because it feels like I have to justify my ability to say no, when in fact all I need to say is no, I'm not able to do that.
Yeah, no is a complete sentence. And what is amazing to me is when I hear a man say no.
Yeah.
Men don't give explanation. They just say no.
Just say no, not doing that.
And we're there trying to figure out, strategize how we're going to see it, package it in such a way that it's going to come out as if it's a no, but I still like you, you still like me.
Exactly. And I think that this is one of the problems, though, because there have been studies done on the fact that women are assessed in their yearly reviews for personality, whereas men are not. And I think it's that fear that drives a lot of, women.
Professional women, definitely.
Women of color are the largest group in the United States suffering from the mental and emotional and physiological effects of stress. Are we surprised? Because it's not just being a woman in the workplace, it's not just being a woman of color in the workplace, but we are desperately trying to make it work for everybody else.
Yes. We're always at the bottom of the totem. And at one point, it gets heavy. You're at the bottom and you're carrying everybody else, it gets heavy. There's not enough sports. Mind you, don't even have time to make it to the gym.
Right? The boulder's going to just take you down with it.
Yeah. So how can people get in contact with you or hear about some of your future activities?
So I've got these links. I'm not sure if they're showing up right now or if we're going to see them at the end. These are the links. Thank you so much. Tech wizardry. These are the Facebook links. There's going to be a really amazing workshop on Your Story is Your Superpower in May. And that will be 3 days in May. And we will be looking at why it's so important to own your story, to know your story, own your story, and tell your story. And that's how you take your place in the world. And that's how you become an incredible mentor. You cannot be a mentor without knowing your story and owning your story. So,
and that's the part. If you don't know your history, you're likely to repeat the mistakes that you've done in the past. And that's the part we need to get a grasp on it. We need to get better at it as a society, as individuals, but also as a society.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfectly right. And I do want to say that I have a quote from Carl Jung here. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Oh, I love it. Can you repeat that? Repeat that, please.
I will. Until you make the unconscious conscious. We've been talking about all this stuff to do with unconscious bias. And we think, oh, it's just something that happens to me. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So it's to do with conscious decision, maybe.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
thank
you for
you.
this wonderful exchange. Thank you for being you. Thank you for the work that you do to
Thank you.
stretch women and understand their own power.
Thank you so much, Paula, for having this opportunity to talk with you again. I always love talking to you.
You know what? It's likewise. It's likewise. We come to a point in our journey and we realize I have to find either I'm the oddball in the larger ocean, or I find those people who are telling me or helping me stay focused on what we're trying to
I am
accomplish.
always happy to be your sister oddball
Oh,
along
thank
the
you.
way.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Likewise, because I think helping the next generation
Mm-hmm.
get further ahead, but also find their own inner peace and power is key
Mm-hmm.
to the
Yes,
society being a
it
better.
is the only way. Transgenerational mentorship is the only way, and I'm firmly convinced of that.
So thank you again, and
Mm.
it's been a pleasure.
It's been lovely. Thank you so much, Paula. And thank you for the amazing work that you do for women. Or you're going to get shy now.
No, I'm not.
Don't be
I'm
shy.
just saying thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay.